Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. My name's Jack. No kidding. I'm a big guy, so folks started calling me Big Jack, kind of like that old Jimmy Dean song from the 60s. I don't work in a mine, but I do build houses. Swinging hammers and hauling lumber has built me up pretty well. I'd probably hold my own against that fictional Jack in a strength contest, though it'd be a close call. No, we don't use air hammers. My boss is old school, takes pride in craftsmanship. Every house we build, he treats as if he's going to live in it himself. He loves to brag that we've driven every single nail by hand, securing each joint personally. Does that make the house any better? No clue. But I do know people can't wait to hire us, and as long as they're lining up, I keep getting paid, and that paycheck covers the finer things, including keeping my wife Chloe happy, because she sure loves to show off. One more thing about me. You'll see why it matters soon. I've never lost an arm wrestling match. Not once. Made a fair bit of money from guys convinced they could outgrip me. Now, about Chloe. We've known each other since childhood. I still remember the first time I saw her, this petite blonde who completely knocked me off balance. Winning her over wasn't easy. She ran with the popular crowd, the football players, the guys with new cars every couple of years, always throwing money around on fancy nights out in Savannah. And before you ask, yeah, I know technically they weren't allowed in clubs before 18, but when you've got connections, rules tend to blur. Back then, Chloe was with a guy named Grant King. Everyone called him Brick. If you don't get why, you might be too young for this story, so maybe go play some ball or something. Chloe was smitten with him, and I figured I didn't stand a chance. I let it go until years later, after college, when she came back home and saw the same guys still grinding away at life. The first time we ran into each other again was at Adams Pharmacy. She had just graduated and was working as an assistant manager at the bank. It was her half-day off, and she'd stop by for a milkshake from their old-fashioned soda fountain. I paid for both of ours. She squinted at me, trying to place my face. "I know you from school, right? You played football?" she asked. "I just can't remember your name." "Not football. I was too busy studying and helping my mom with bills." Her eyes widened. "Jack? Jack Turner?" She stared like she'd seen a ghost. "You won't believe this, but I had the biggest crush on you until junior year. I was too shy to say anything. You probably never noticed me." I was floored. This stunning woman, a dead ringer for a young Nicole Kidman, had a crush on me? Then I noticed. No ring on her finger. This time, I wasn't about to miss my chance. "How about a dance at the American Legion hut next Friday?" I asked. I nearly fell over when she said yes. From that night, we were inseparable. 9 months later, we were married. To me, she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. We settled just outside town, in a house hidden deep in the woods, so secluded you'd never find it unless you knew it was there. Living out there had its perks. No door-to-door salespeople, plenty of space for the kids to run free. The only real threat was the occasional snake, but our German pointer mix, Bruno, made sure no snake, or anything else for that matter, got close. 2 legs or 4 if you weren't welcome, Bruno made sure you regretted stepping foot on our land. He'd lay down his life for our kids. Life was good. A wife who adored me as much as I adored her. 2 kids I was proud of. Money was never a worry. And the one thing that gnawed at me when we first got married? Well, I got over that a long time ago. I know what you're thinking. So let's get it out of the way. That whole myth about a man's size being tied to his hands and feet. Absolute nonsense. Sure, I'm bigger than most guys, but where it counts, I'm just about average. Just over 6 inches long, 1.5 inches in diameter. Not comparing myself to athletes or soldiers, but from what I've read, that's pretty standard. Early in our marriage, I was self-conscious. Chloe had dated a guy named Meat before me, and I worried about how I measured up. No pun intended. but she always reassured me that I knew exactly what I was doing. I even did some research, learned how to make sure she was satisfied. And let's just say, if she wasn't enjoying herself, she was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance, because to this day, she's never complained about a single kiss we've shared. People see me as tough, hardened by life's trials, but beneath that exterior, I've always had a tender spot, perhaps too tender, especially when it came to Chloe. I found it nearly impossible to refuse her anything. On the rare occasions I did, her tears would break me down without fail. I simply couldn't bear to see a woman cry. Maybe that weakness stemmed from watching my mother cry too often. But if there's one thing I've never been good at, it's recognizing when love is a lie. It never occurred to me that Chloe might be dissatisfied with our life together, not until that night in 2011. My usual routine involved heading to Nick's bar with my buddies, tossing back beers, playing pool, and shooting the breeze until midnight. That was the plan, and that was what Chloe expected. But that night, something felt different. Instead of spending hours at the bar, I found my thoughts drifting back home to the woman waiting for me. So, after barely an hour, just as the last hints of daylight faded, I surprised myself. I told the guys I was heading out early and left. I've mentioned the road that leads to the front of our house, but there's another route, the back road. It snakes past the barn and the stables, no better maintained than the front, but I often used it to check on the animals. With the kids staying at their grandparents' that weekend, I wasn't sure if Chloe had tended to them. As it turned out, I had no reason to worry. She had everything under control. I parked by the barn and made my way toward the house. Chloe had a strict rule about tracking dirt inside, so we kept a bench on the back porch where I always switched my work boots for my bedroom slippers. That night, an early autumn breeze whispered through the open windows, her way of cutting down on the air conditioning bill. Only 10 feet of space and a thin mesh screen separated me from our den, where I could see everything yet remained unseen, shrouded in the darkness outside. I hadn't been paying much attention to the scene inside until an unfamiliar male voice pierced the silence. "You sure your husband won't be home anytime soon?" "Relax," Chloe murmured reassuringly. "Jack won't be back until Nick's closes at midnight. We have the whole place to ourselves. Until then, I'm all yours." At that moment, my world imploded. Some might call me weak, others might call me insane. I wouldn't argue with either assessment, but something inside me shifted, and I reacted in a way I never could have predicted. I'd read about men who got a thrill from watching their wives with someone else, but I never imagined I'd be one of them. And I wasn't, not in the way they were. Those men found excitement in it, some kind of twisted pleasure. What I felt was nothing but devastation. I sat there, motionless, as tears slipped down my face, witnessing the unraveling of everything I believed in. I could have stormed inside, beaten Grant to a pulp, maybe even lashed out at Chloe. But what good would that have done? This wasn't just a meaningless fling, it was her past creeping back into our present. Even if I stopped them tonight, they'd only find another time, another place, far from my reach. No, I needed evidence, proof that would hold up in divorce court. Seated on the couch, facing my direction, they gave me the perfect angle. As they kissed, I raised my phone, capturing everything, the way Grant's hands roamed over her, the way she welcomed his touch. And then I saw it, the very reason he had earned the nickname Meat. The same woman who once recoiled at my requests, calling them degrading, now showed no hesitation with him. "Damn, baby, you've got me so worked up. I need to get this in you," Grant murmured. I snapped more photos, documenting their betrayal from every angle. I was nearly satisfied with what I had when Grant made his worst mistake. Like so many men, he couldn't just take what was given. He had to boast. "You said I was the best you ever had. That was true, right?" he asked smugly. "Of course, baby," Chloe purred. "I wasn't lying. Nothing else has ever felt this good, not since high school." His face lit up with satisfaction at her words. "And Jack?" he pressed. He's not as big as me, is he? She laughed, tracing her fingers along his chest. Oh, honey, not even close. Don't get me wrong, he tries, but it's like comparing a Volkswagen to a Corvette. She reached for a towel she must have brought in earlier, wiping herself off with casual ease. Ready for round 2? She teased. Grant didn't need any encouragement. As they started up again, my ears burned with the sound of Chloe joining in his mockery. Instead of defending me, or at the very least keeping quiet, she egged him on. No, baby, my little wimpy husband could never compare to you. They said more, but by then I wasn't really listening. My rage was white hot, my vision blurred with fury. And yet, in the midst of my seething anger, a moment of clarity emerged. I knew exactly what to do. Moving with precision, I slipped through the back door unnoticed. Grant, too lost in his pleasure, remained oblivious as I crept closer. His body moved in a rhythmic thrust, utterly unaware of the presence lurking just inches behind him. As he reached his peak, he groaned, "Here it comes, baby. Maybe you can get hubby to clean you up when he gets home." "Good idea," Chloe giggled. "I'll leave it just like this. Hell, he'll probably be so drunk he won't even notice." By then, I was close enough to reach out. My right hand hovered inches from the vulnerable sack swaying before me, my left poised near the thick ponytail he always tied with such pride. In that moment, he was mine. "How much are you willing to bet, sweetheart?" I murmured, yanking his head back with a brutal grip. The response was immediate. Grant let out a strangled gasp before his body went limp, unconscious in my grasp. My fingers remained clenched, unyielding, even as his dead weight sagged. Chloe, scrambling to cover herself, choked on her fear. "Jack, please, don't do this," she stammered, desperate. "It's not what it looks like," I scoffed. "Oh yeah? Then enlighten me, Chloe. Because from where I'm standing, it looks an awful lot like the woman I trusted has been sneaking around with her ex." "What's your excuse?" Tears streaked down her face as she shuddered. You weren't supposed to find out." "But I did," I shot back, my voice dripping with venom. Grant was nothing but dead weight in my arms now, so I let him drop, only realizing after that I still had a clump of his hair stuck between my fingers. I examined it for a brief moment, before tossing it aside like garbage. Chloe's eyes widened in terror, but she was frozen in place. Not that it would have made a difference if she ran. A shriek tore from her throat as I grabbed her, but fear had already paralyzed her. Dragging her across my lap as I sank into my recliner, I did what should have been done long ago. The signs had always been there, glaring and undeniable, but I had been too blind, too stupid to see them. Love does that to a man. Well, hindsight is crystal clear now, and the truth was unavoidable. I didn't hurt her badly, just enough to make sure she understood. When I decided she had learned her lesson, I shoved her off me, and she hit the floor with a dull thud. With a sneer, I kicked her clothes toward her. "Get dressed. Your boyfriend needs a hospital." She scrambled for her clothes, hastily pulling them on, her voice small and uncertain. Are you going to help him?" A sharp, humorless laugh escaped me. Not a chance. He made this mess. Let him clean it up. Dragging Grant's unconscious body outside, I dumped him into the back seat of her car. Before shutting the door, I couldn't resist giving him one last parting gift, a squeeze hard enough to make him let out a weak, pitiful groan before slipping under again. He wouldn't even feel the potholes on the way to the ER. Chloe hesitated as she slid into the driver's seat, her tear-streaked face turning to me. "Jack, please. We can fix this." It meant nothing. It was just a meaningless fling. I stayed silent. Maybe if it had been just that, just a mistake, we could have found a way forward. But it wasn't. She had laughed at me, humiliated me, all while betraying everything we'd built. Those words, those actions, were carved into my bones. Still, for a moment, I almost faltered. Almost. But then I remembered every story I'd heard about men who forgave, only to be called weak. That wasn't me. I refused to be that man. No, I said, my voice like iron. Not a chance. She sniffled, her hands trembling on the wheel. But I don't have anywhere to go. The way her voice cracked, the way her sobs shook her shoulders, might have swayed another man. But not me. She played her last desperate hand. If you forgive me, I'll tell the cops Grant just fell. I'll swear it was an accident. I stared at her. Cops? What cops? I caught him with my wife. There won't be a trial. He got what he deserved. And with that, I turned away. I listened as the engine sputtered to life and faded into the distance. That was the last I'd see of her, I told myself. The final chapter of this miserable story. That night, I slept like a man free of chains. By morning, her things were gone from the porch. A clean slate. First on my agenda, finding a woman who understood loyalty, after finalizing the divorce, of course. Unfortunately, Chloe had one last surprise in store. The next day, two of the biggest cops I'd ever seen were at my door. Before I knew what was happening, I was in cuffs. Turns out, her sob story about having nowhere to go was just that. A story. Things went from bad to worse when I tried posting bail and discovered that she had drained our joint account months ago. With nothing left, I was stuck with a public defender, some fresh-faced kid who looked like he'd never handled anything bigger than a parking violation. The DA spun the narrative, painting me as an unhinged monster who had brutalized my poor, innocent wife and her old classmate. The judge, though, had seen the photos, though he didn't let the jury see them. That little mercy was the only reason my sentence got knocked down to 3 years, with the possibility of probation if I signed over the house and land to Chloe. I hesitated, but in the end, I signed. Why? Because I knew what waited for me in prison. One guy like Cletus I could handle, but a whole block full of them? Not a chance. Now, I live in a modest place by the lake. It's nothing luxurious, but I've made it comfortable, with my own money, of course. It's a roof over my head and a home for the kids when I have them on weekends. And since both my family and my former in-laws took my side, I still get a decent home-cooked meal more often than not. I still enjoy reading about love and betrayal, but I don't waste time on people who claim they would have done things differently. Let me tell you, pull a stunt like that in today's world, and you won't walk away without paying the price. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.